Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Buyer to Boss, Navigating the Legal Path to Business Ownership. Our speakers today are Ted Scollie, who is a lawyer for over 30 years with experience in corporate and commercial law, labor and employment, and Indigenous law. Ted has advised a wide range of Indigenous businesses and organizations on commercial acquisitions, financing, and business structuring in Northern Ontario, and he is joined by his associates, Brent Jourdain and Brad Kreiderman, who work closely with Ted. Today they will discuss the key legal steps involved with buying a business, from planning and due diligence to transition and growth strategies. We're excited to have them here to share their insight. And with that, you guys can take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our webinar. As Peter said, I'm Ted Scollie, partner here at Ericksons in Thunder Bay. Do mainly Indigenous commercial work, and these are my two associates, Brad Kreiderman and Brent Jourdain. Brent Jourdain is a proud member of Couchiching First Nation and has joined us recently, and they're both doing a fantastic job. So I will let them start.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. So just a brief run through of what we will be touching on here. So the three phases outlined are: 1, the planning and organization phase; 2, the acquisitions and business transitions phase; and 3, the maintenance and expansion phase. I will be giving you what we think are some of the important initial questions and considerations for the first phase. And after I'm done with my section, I will turn this over to my colleague Brent for the other 2 phases. These different phases of acquiring a business all contain their own set of considerations and questions you must ask yourself. Another important thing to note is that in order for the process to be done as smoothly and efficiently as possible when buying a business, there are often numerous professional service providers involved throughout these phases. It's beneficial to do that, to find service providers, because they can offer expertise in their respective manners. So, just as another note on the importance of obtaining professional help with something like buying a business, as this will be a recurring theme throughout our webinar. Oftentimes, finding a business is not easy, especially one that specifically fits your needs. On the flip side, more often than not, those who are taking the steps in selling their business and handing over ownership or even retiring do not usually make this public knowledge. So this is where a network of contacts and professionals can help guide you in the right direction. Even as lawyers, we often consult with accountants, lenders, and other professionals when we are working. So in sharing your plan with people you trust, whether it be family, friends, accountants, legal representatives, whoever, it helps cast a wide net, which can provide you with potential leads. Just as a quick example, lawyers and accountants are often the first ones to know about a seller's intentions to sell their business. So they usually have their foot in the door, which can also make an easy transition in terms of making first contact. And finally, seeking professional advice is always a good start in order to avoid unexpected pitfalls and avoidable costs. One thing we cannot stress enough to our clients is that it's much easier for us to help you avoid a problem than it is to fix one after the fact. Professionals can assist you in determining preliminary details, such as how long a business has been for sale and why, or is the product still in service or demand. With all that being said, we will now move on to the first steps that you as a potential business owner should consider when looking into buying a business. All right, so phase 1, planning and organization. Some important questions to consider when you're thinking of buying a business are: what kind of business are you looking for? What kind of business are you looking to get into? What kind of property will be acquired in the acquisition? What is your price point? What is your potential loan eligibility? How do you retain counsel, accountants? If not, who will you go to? Where is the business going to operate? And what kind of scale are you looking to start with and build to? These questions will help you get your bearings in getting started. It will help you home in on a definitive goal and start the process of how you will achieve said goal. So once you have answered the preliminary questions, it will be important to consider the following steps prior to engaging in acquiring a business. So number 1 would be determining what will be a suitable business for your needs, how you will get there, and taking the necessary steps to secure financing. These next few slides will provide you with the ideas and considerations with respect to the first 2 steps, which is finding a suitable business and how you go about getting where you want to be. So the keys to determining a suitable business for you is to start by defining your acquisition goals and criteria, which includes figuring out a strategic fit. For example, what you hope to achieve with the acquisition, what your strategic goals are, and how this business will help you reach them. The second is financial viability, which includes determining your investment budget and desired return on investment. The third is industry and market. It's crucial to identify the specific industry or market segment you are interested in. Number 4 is the business size and type. So determining the size of the business and the type of business you are looking to acquire, whether it's small, medium, or large size corporations, independent corporations, partnerships, or franchises. And 5, cultural compatibility, which includes assessing whether a company's culture may align with your own and what changes would need to be made to suit your needs and your customers' needs. So we'll go a little bit deeper into the strategic fit. So the strategic fit component rests in determining what you hope to achieve with the acquisition, and it will depend on what your intention is when buying a business. For example, if you were looking to grow an existing business, it might be beneficial to look into acquiring the assets of another business. If you were looking to acquire technology and or talent for a current business you operate, the main thing with this component is that depending on how you intend to purchase the business, which will be discussed in greater detail later, you can acquire the assets, staff and employees, and other particulars of a business to help you suit your needs. This can be considered a strategic shortcut to instantly absorb the capabilities and people that a target company has already developed and recruited. If you are trying to gain access into supply and distribution channels, sometimes acquiring a business with a good reputation can help you gain access into these channels. This allows a buyer to instantly integrate and leverage the acquired company's existing relationships, infrastructure, and market presence. And finally, if you intend to grow your own current product or services offering, if your plan is to purchase a business in the same industry as one you currently operate, then similar to obtaining the assets and talent of an acquired business, you can determine whether their current services and products might be more beneficial to you, or you can use what you acquire to better your own products and services. The strategic fit is not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. It will depend entirely on what you're planning to achieve with the acquisition of a business. For example, someone who is looking to expand on their current business may be looking to acquire assets from an existing business to help expand their current operations, or even situations where people look to purchase competing businesses. It all depends on what you want and how you want to get there. Turning to financial viability, determining your investment budget and desired return on investment is crucial to this process. If you are acquiring a business to help a current business you own or operate, determine how the acquisition will help shape future returns for your current business operations. In the alternative, if you do not already have a business, acquiring one can be an investment for yourself. So looking at these two scenarios, in the event that you do not already own and operate a business, investing in one by acquisition can be an immediate revenue stream or work in progress, depending on how well the business is doing. If proper due diligence is taken before acquiring the business, you can be buying a profitable business with a proven track record, revenue, various customers and clients, which reduces the risks of predictability of future returns. And there is a potential for appreciation of the business. If, for example, you have skills, knowledge, and expertise in a certain industry, you may be able to turn an underperforming business into a profitable one. You may even be able to grow and improve the business, increasing its value and in turn increasing your return. On the other hand, if you already own and operate a business, acquiring another business may accelerate your growth and immediately grow your top line revenue by adding the acquired business's sales to your own. This could increase your own financial portfolio and encourage other investors to invest in your business. It can also help you integrate operations, for example, combining market initiatives, financial coordination, or supply chain, which can reduce overlapping costs, and you can acquire more efficient and cost-effective solutions to your current business model. And finally, this can be a strategic expansion to enter into new markets, new product lines, or access new customer segments, leading to potential growth and revenue. These components will all combine to allow you to have a much stronger competitive position, leading to pricing power and operational advantages, both of which can contribute to a return on investment. However, a lot of this is based on the assumption that you've done your due diligence in determining which business will work best, and the viability of the target business itself. The third step we will discuss here is industry and market. So it's important to consider and identify the specific industry and market segment you are interested in. For example, are you looking for a franchise or independent business? Are you looking for an underperforming business to turn around due to skills, knowledge, or expertise in a particular market or industry? 3, are you looking for something that deals in manufacturing, retail trade, distributions, or consulting services, or anything that you may have particular skills in? Are you looking for an online business or developing an online business in tandem with a physical business? Are you looking at a local or international market, or are you looking to acquire a competing business? The sooner you consider these options in this process, the sooner you will have an opportunity to narrow down the types of business that will best suit your needs. For example, if you want to operate a particular business with immediate goodwill, reputation, and accessible growth potential, it may be beneficial for you to look into a successful franchise. With respect to considering local and international markets, this is something you should consider early on, as it will help guide you in terms of what steps to take toward expanding your operations or which local, interprovincial, or national customer segments you will target, and the respective viability of these options. Turning to business size and type, this one is quite straightforward. However, it may depend on your financial viability. For example, acquiring larger corporations may require more capital. The importance of considering the size and type of business for your goals is that it will allow you to assess which types work best for you. For example, a corporation, sole proprietorship, or a partnership. Depends which structure you wish to operate under going forward. This may also come down to a personal preference and which structure of business you believe you'll be able to grow, incorporate, or build your own business around. This is one aspect where legal and financial consultants can be especially helpful. From a legal standpoint, corporate lawyers typically deal with different business structures quite frequently. Depending on your business plans and methodologies, we can be available to determine which structure would work best for you, your operations, and your future plans. And turning to the final consideration under the steps in phase 1, the final consideration for determining a suitable business is cultural compatibility. This includes asking yourself, what will your employee culture be? And in the event that you are looking at acquiring a new business, how will the different employees and work cultures mesh? This can include determining such things as whether your risk tolerance is or will be conservative or innovative, will the work styles be collaborative or independent, or will conflict resolution be direct or indirect? Another thing you should ask is, will you have partnerships with First Nations, for example, other businesses, or other individuals, and how will you make your businesses culturally competent? Determining your core values, leadership, decision-making styles, communication skills, and attitudes toward risk or work-life balance can all be things to incorporate when determining your business culture. It can be factored in when looking at a target business to acquire as well. A final note on this aspect is that it may also be beneficial to build your business's culture around your potential or current customer base and potential or current employee base. The final aspect that we will discuss under phase 1 is the process of securing financing and potential loan eligibility. This is something that an accountant, advisor, or lender will be best able to advise. However, we can provide you with a brief overview of the critical considerations here. In terms of securing financing, it is important to have a comprehensive business plan. This may include considering your financial readiness, determining who you will trust with reviewing your finances, for example, your accountant, looking at a target's business's financial health, as well as your own if you have one, and anticipating the potential for debt on acquisition and how well you are prepared to deal with this debt. With respect to assessing your financial readiness, this may include checking your credit score, gauging the equity or cash that you can contribute to the purchase of a business, and beginning the preparation of your personal financial statements. While this is something you would not need to worry about until you're certain you would like to acquire a new business, the sooner you begin planning financially, the sooner you can get on the right track and be properly prepared. Finally, when looking at lenders, in most cases, lenders will typically assess creditworthiness, business cash flow, business experience, amount available for a down payment, collateral, and risk profile. The main thing being assessed here is the potential transaction and the borrower's ability to repay the loan. Even as lawyers, we often consult with accountants and lenders. For our purposes today, we just want to emphasize the importance of these considerations when developing a financial plan for your future business acquisition. This again speaks to the importance of consulting professionals, such as lawyers, accountants, and lenders. I will now turn this presentation over to Mr. Jourdain to discuss phase 2 and phase 3.
So hi everyone. Thank you, Brad, for going through the first phase and everything. Just as a quick overview, everything in the first phase is pretty vital for what would be phase 2, being how do you actually acquire, go through buying the business? How the phase one is designed to get you prepared to do that, to know what your availability is financially, to set you up so you know you have a plan, a goal, and then goes beyond the acquisition too into the maintenance and growth phase that I'll go through as well. It's really important for everything. Considering beforehand, before you even purchase the business, what do you want it to look like in the end game? What is available to you? Like Brad was saying, what structure is best for you? And that goes through everything from legal structure for liability, tax purposes, everything like that is super important. But once you have all of that and you know all of that and you're prepared, the next step is how do you actually go about buying the business, acquiring the business? And again, we're going to sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but that's where your legal and financial advisors can really help. There's a lot that goes into owning, buying, planning for a business. There's a lot of nuances nowadays with the different acts, the different availability to you. And that's where I think Brad said it best earlier, is it's easier to solve a problem before it actually becomes a problem rather than after it already has. It's really much easier to keep you out of a problem at the end of the day, and honestly a lot cheaper at the end of the day than solving one. So going through the acquisition phase, after you've done the initial planning, some important questions to consider for the actual acquisition would be, have you done the proper due diligence? What is the current legal status of the business? What would you like it to be in the end? What will you need for additional licenses, permits? Are there licenses, permits that the business is already currently under that we would have to either get rid of or negotiate or keep throughout the process? That's all going to be really important. What are going to be the potential operating costs after you acquire the business? How many employees will you need? Where do you plan on beginning your operations and at what scale, and what will it grow into? What insurance will you need? And how will you actually purchase it? Through an asset or share purchase? These are all important questions when thinking of getting to that acquisition phase and actually starting it. That leads to the actual agreement that makes the purchase binding. So moving on to the next slide. Obviously, what's important in this is how do you actually acquire the business? And it can be done in a couple ways, and it depends on what is the current business you're acquiring. Is it incorporated? Is it a partnership? Is it a sole proprietorship? And keep in mind, this is assuming that you're buying a business and not starting one from scratch. All of this, all the planning and everything can of course be vital for when you're starting a business from scratch, but also when you're purchasing a business. So just keep in mind that today we're talking about outright purchasing a business that's already there through its shares or assets. Now, going more into the two ways that you can actually purchase the business, primarily the ways that we do it are through an asset purchase or a share purchase. And there's a very important distinction between the two. For a share purchase, many corporations, or I should say all corporations, act through shares at the end of the day, which are your controlling interest in your ownership interest, your controlling interest, your voting rights, your equity rights into what would be a corporation. So buying those shares through a share purchase agreement gives you the controlling interest over the entire operations of the business. And that would be more for taking over what's existing and what's there. Not that you couldn't change it after you purchase it, but this is assuming that you like the current structure of the business and you're taking it over to expand it and continue the operations as is. Through an asset purchase, this would primarily be used when you want to purchase the assets of a business, but maybe not the actual entity itself, or you'd like to purchase the assets and create a new entity to operate. Now, this can be done. Some businesses don't have shares. When you think of a partnership, sole proprietorship, in that kind of way, you obviously can't do a share purchase at the end of the day because there's no shares. So that's where you would go more into the asset purchase agreement and purchase all the assets to then operate out of all the assets. Both options come with their own set of legal, financial, and tax implications at the end of the day. And even further going deeper into that, you'll see that that all is a consideration for the type and structure of the business as well. But determining which type of purchase would best suit your option comes up to the individual itself and what you would want the business to grow into, what you want to purchase out of the existing business, and how you want to operate. And this is where, again, your advisors come in and are very important for making sure you understand what you're purchasing, and your liability and your implications at the end of the day. So keep those two in mind, that you're almost always operating according to those two ways of purchasing the business. But let's actually go through, let's see this slide. Okay, so just touching on the tax implications for the type of business you want to acquire. Again, your legal and financial are going to be pretty vital in this, because you'll see is that liability-wise and tax-wise, there are different implications for the type of purchase you're going to use and also the type of business structure that you're going to use. And so first, thinking of, are you taking over a sole proprietorship, partnership, or a corporation? They all have different levels of liability that are used, and that's why there's different structures you can use. It's primarily for the liability and the tax implications. I don't think it's any secret that corporations, businesses are good for leaning on the tax advantages, but getting the most out of it requires doing a good evaluation of what best fits your need. Partnerships and corporations, just so you know, can be further broken down into limited liability partnerships, limited partnerships, general partnerships. Corporations can be further broken down, and they all have, again, their different liability and tax implication concerns. And this goes into what we primarily do with a lot of First Nation corporations and businesses. There's exemptions on Indigenous owned businesses as well, whether they're owned exactly primarily by the band, or if they're at least 51% Indigenous controlled. That can be through a partnership, it can be through joint ventures, it can be through corporations. But if you can hit those marks, then one thing we always want to look for is how we can use that exemption to get the most out of the business and the finances for the business at the end of the day. So that ties into the due diligence as well, but obviously before we enter any agreement for any purchase, one of the most important things, if not the most important, is doing proper due diligence. And this is, again, going to sound like a little bit of a broken record, but where your advisors really, really come in and are important for making sure you understand what you're getting into. Financially reviewing the business's statements, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, to assess its financial health and performance, what tax implications will be involved. You'd want to assess all that. Legally, we want to look at the business structure, make sure it's operating legally, make sure there's no outstanding legal issues, lawsuits, pending litigation, because that would become your responsibility if you purchase the business and you don't have anything in the agreement that exempts you from that. We want to make sure that before anything moves forward. Evaluation of the assets of the business. Assets can be everything from your licenses, permits, to your vehicles, buildings, property. And we'd want to do evaluation of where those assets are at, what condition they're in, everything like that, to make sure what you're acquiring is in good condition, is best for you, works for you. Further going on the assets, important with the business too is your employees, any leases, contracts you have with outside parties. We'd want to review all of those and see what third parties, leases, and contracts we'd have to consult with to do the purchase. We'd want to review all leases to see which ones you'd want to assume through the purchase, if any. Same with the contracts, agreements, the employees. We'd want to look at all of that. And see really what you're assuming throughout the purchase and what you're taking from the seller. Third-party consents, partnerships. Sometimes you have partners that you enter into businesses with, and you also have third parties that are involved with businesses that do either consulting, supplying, anything like that. And you'd want to know who is a third party to the original business, who would you want to keep as a third party throughout the business. Is there contracts that you really can't get out of? We want to know all that ahead of really executing the purchase, and that's where we would do negotiations for the actual agreement. Entering into the actual agreement, it comes down to a negotiation between the parties, no matter what route you take, and all this is going to be really important for determining what's important to you throughout the purchase, and it's everything we're going to put into the actual agreement at the end of the day. But we can't know what's important to you without going over this without assessing all this and explaining it to you, so you have a full understanding and go, yes, that's important to me, I need that throughout this, or no, I don't want to assume that liability or that asset. Those are all things that we can negotiate throughout the agreement. So what is the actual process for execution? And in doing all that due diligence, one important thing is that obviously no one's just going to hand over their data at the end of the day. Some of this data that they're going to hand over, their financials for the business, you'd obviously want to see that throughout any purchase before anything is official, all the assets like that. We want to ensure any information going back and forth is confidential on both sides prior to any agreement, and that's where we would first usually use a letter of intent. And what that does, I will go through it a little bit more on the next slide, but just to highlight it, is it essentially outlines your initial terms for an agreement. It's primarily unbinding at the end of the day, but makes it efficient for moving towards that final agreement and outlines some of the most important terms and timelines for entering that agreement. It can be the purchase price, payment terms, conditions for getting into that agreement, and timeline. And for keeping everything confidential, usually part of the LOI would be entering into a non-disclosure agreement. So at this point, maybe before the LOI and doing the LOI, the point of it is so that you can go further with the negotiations, enter the non-disclosure agreement to get all that financial data, the corporate structure data, without entering into something that's binding at the end of the day. And then we would use all that to get to that final purchase agreement, which again can be done through a share purchase or asset purchase at the end of the day. So going in a little bit farther into the LOI, like I was just saying, the LOI sets out your initial intentions and your offer to buy the business. It sets out the initial terms that both parties find essential for entering the agreement. But of course, that's still going to be, the details of it will be negotiated when entering into that final agreement. This can include the purchase price, if that's agreed to at this point, or the initial proposed price, the timeline, payment terms, conditions again, that are supposed to be transitioned into that final agreement. Another part of it would be the non-disclosure agreement, like I said, so that everything is kept confidential on both sides and protects both parties. And the point of this is that it's primarily non-binding, so you can get out of it, but it makes entering that final agreement more efficient and an easier process so that we can start sending information back and forth. So the agreement. Now this is going to be where things become actually fully binding once executed with the purchase. This is where you do the primary negotiations, set out all the terms, and this is where you would use your legal and financial help, where we would work with the financial advisors that you chose to go through the agreement, make sure it's tailored towards you. We would get it reviewed, approved by you, answer any questions, explain it likely before we even send it to the other side. And then we would send it to the other side, and then we'd go through the process of negotiating it back and forth until everyone is happy with the final agreement, happy with the timeline, and we set a final date for the execution and the transition of the purchase. Now, keep in mind that this is a high-level overview of what the acquisition phase would look like, but each part of the phase, we could probably sit here for the whole day and go through the nuances and little parts of each phase, but that's where your advisors like us come in and explain that for each individual and their unique circumstance, because each purchase is unique in its own way at the end of the day, and that's important to keep in mind. Once the agreement is fully executed, that's where the purchase gets official. There will be a date you take over or a transition, kind of contemplated in the agreement, a schedule for it. And that's where you would go from buyer to boss as said in this agreement. And then you would look at operating from that point, expanding the business, growing it at the end of the day. So that is, in a nutshell, the acquisition phase. Like I said, just a high level overview of it. But we can't stress enough that it's important to get your advisors involved in this phase, even in the planning, like Brad was going over, to make sure everything is going smoothly. Because it's not fun to realize that problems come up or that something wasn't contemplated in the agreement after the fact. And no one likes to go through a whole big litigation process that costs even more money at the end of the day. And that's what we try to avoid with setting this up initially. So phase 3, maintenance, expansion, growth, however you want to put it. Once you are the boss of the business, primarily if anyone ever gets involved with buying a business, the goal is to, of course, expand, grow that business into what you want it to be. And that's up to the individual itself. But some initial questions to consider that really would be a part of that initial planning before you even buy the business too is how big do you intend to grow? What do you intend to grow into? When you're growing, obviously you're going to need some financial help, some loans from lenders, and sometimes that means taking a loss in your first little bit of owning the business to get those loans, operate through them, and then start building a revenue through that at the end of the day. Another term in terms of maintenance, how do you, once you own a business, maintain proper books, records? How do you maintain your insurance? You're maintaining your operations of the business through your employees. Everything like that is going to be really important once you are actually the boss of the business. And it's on you as the boss at the end of the day, once you've acquired the business, to make sure everything's going smoothly and the business is successful. So you want to contemplate this even before you buy the business, but after you've bought it as well. You're going to kind of ongoingly review all of this and see where things are going, assess them, how things are working, and everything like that. So maintenance, some things to assess, again, before you buy the business, but ongoingly after you buy the business, is your employees, employment contracts, and areas for growth in employees. Depending on what you want your business to grow into, you may need new employees, you may need to restructure employees, and look at areas for growth, for new sections of employees, maybe new positions. That's things you want to assess prior to the business, but again, you'll be ongoingly, that never stops once you have a business. Maintaining insurance compliance. I know insurance and tax is everyone's favorite topic, but this is obviously important for a business, having that proper insurance so the liability doesn't come back to you at the end of the day. I won't say all the time, but primarily businesses operate as their own entity. So making sure you have that proper insurance, whether they do or not, to make sure it doesn't come back on either you personally or the business, is important for having that insurance. So working with your insurance providers to make sure you're maintaining it properly, that you have the proper insurance coverage, depending on if you have vehicles, if you need general liability, if you need officer director liability insurance. It's really up to the specific business at the end of the day, but that's going to be important liability wise, so you don't get caught with these big insurance claims. Maintaining corporate records, that's where we come in, and of course we always recommend that you have your legal consultants maintain your corporate records. Just as an example, we maintain a lot of our clients' corporate books and minute books, as we call them, which hold your corporate resolutions, changing corporate structures, contracts, really anything. And we hold them so that we can obviously maintain them, know when things need to be updated, and so that they don't get lost at the end of the day, because that becomes a bigger issue too. Maintaining financial books, again, This is where a lot of businesses do have a financial department or employee that oversees a lot of the day-to-day financials, but it's also important, depending on the size of the business, that you have your financial consultants too at the end of the day, so they can do proper audits, financial books, have a proper understanding of the corporation or the business's finances at the end of the day. This will be important for thinking of growth too as well. What can you grow into according to your finances? Do you have the capital to do it? Are you going to need to pursue lending? Anything like that will be greatly helpful in having those financial consultants. So growth and expansion. We've talked about the maintenance, but then how do you grow from there too as well? Once you purchase the business, depending on how small, how big the business is initially, a lot of the questions that come up with us is how do we grow into that area? What's required? What would it look like? Is it financially viable? These are all big questions. They're scary questions in terms of growing and expanding a business. Obviously, expanding a business financially comes with its risks, but if it's done properly, it can also be very rewarding, whether it's personally, financially, if it works out at the end of the day. Growing that business is the ultimate goal by really most or any business owners. So how, in terms of growing and expanding the business, what is the current structure of the business? How big, small is it? Is it a corporation? Is it a partnership? Does that current structure work for its growth? We're going to need to assess all of that. Are you growing into an entirely new area or into a new market? That's going to be another consideration. Or are you keeping within the same market? Do you need new employees through the growth? Anything like that. All of that's going to be important. Do you need new licenses, permits to enter into a new area of growth or an existing area of growth? Do you need lending? All of that's going to be important to growth and expansion. And that's where, again, you go to your advisors and get the opinions and the full understanding of what the implications are for growing and expanding the business, what it will look like, what you need to do, how to do it properly. That's where it's vital to get us ahead of the problem again before it becomes a problem and it becomes either a court case or negotiation. No one wants to see that. But that's where all of this comes into in the planning beforehand to try to avoid that at the end of the day. And these are all questions that really, if you came to us, we would be asking you to get more of a clarity on what direction to go. What is the uniqueness of the business? How would it work best to expand it and into what areas? All of that is going to be vital for gaining a full understanding and operating the business, expanding it, buying it in any stage. That initial planning that Brad went through is all going to be vital towards all of that, and having a full understanding, bringing that full understanding to your advisors. The nice thing is if you don't have all those questions prepared, we're the ones that are going to be asking you those questions, trying to figure those out and guiding you through that process. I really view us as guides and helps through a lot of these processes, advocates throughout a lot of these processes, through the negotiation to make sure things are done properly. And we're always happy to hear questions and to meet new people and help people out with what are big decisions in their life. A lot of money goes into businesses, a lot of liability goes into businesses. And so knowing what you're getting into, doing proper planning, and having the proper consultants is that you trust and have a good relationship with too is all really important at the end of the day. So that in a nutshell is our 3 phases that we kind of high level overviews of what we wanted to touch base on throughout this. Again, it's a high level overview and there are much more little nuances that go into each phase, each question, and each route can really change everything depending on if it's a partnership, corporation that changes everything from each phase to each phase. These are the questions that we'd want you to consider beforehand, starting the process and throughout the process. But keep in mind that it's just a high level overview that we're giving today, and I can't stress that enough. Barring any final comments from Ted or Brad, though, that's all I have for the last three phrases, and I have our contacts up on the board for anyone that wants to contact us, or feel free to contact NADF too. Then they can get a hold of us as well.
Yeah, I just have one final comment. Thank you both. And depending on the type of business, like First Nations, for example, can take advantage of the Income Tax Act exemptions from a public body performing a function of government in Canada. And so there are ways to set up Indigenous businesses, First Nation businesses that can be tax exempt. And so that's something that I just wanted to touch on. That's typically through the use of a limited partnership. And that works mainly when they're First Nations themselves owned. When it comes to individuals who are Indigenous, there are some other strategies that you can look at depending on where the income is earned from the business that can also help with some tax exemptions as well too. So I mean, depending on what you're doing, there are some other options tax-wise to consider, and of course any of us would be happy to discuss those with you as well. I think that concludes our presentation, so I guess we can open it up to any questions now. And if there are no questions, that means we did a good job. No.
Yeah, so looks like there are no questions in the chat. Okay. But if anyone has any questions, yeah, their emails are up on the screen, and we'll also grab a copy of the presentation to send out to you all later on. So with that, thank you guys so much for doing this presentation. Very much appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, please, anybody out in the audience listening, don't hesitate to contact any of us just to chat, even if you have some questions. I'm very happy to do that.